You're listening to The Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper.
And I'm Carolyn Nelson.
And we're going to go right down to Phoenix for the metal report. Good evening, Gene.
How you doing tonight, Bill?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing pretty good here. Gold had a high today of 384.30 and a low of 378.80 to close at 382, even up 60 cents. Silver had a high of 561, a low of 540 to close at 554, up 4 cents. And platinum had a high of 404.50 and a low of 395 to close at 399.20, down 20 cents. And the mighty Dow had a high of 3740.80 and a low of 3,760 cents to close at 3732.80, up $12.20. And that's what's happening in the metals and the markets today. How have you been doing, Bill?
Pretty good. What's happening in Phoenix?
What's happening in Phoenix? Well, it's getting warm down here.
What's warm?
Well, 90s, 95, 96, something like that. Starting to heat up, starting to get into the summer months here.
Eat your heart out. Pretty soon they'll be dropping dead on the sidewalks.
There you go. It's all headed up to your area just to cool down.
Yeah, it's always nice up here.
Yeah. Well, hey, I just want to tell you, Bill, we appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work, and give us a call. I'll get you some information on the metals and how you can start protecting yourself. The dollar is extremely weak against foreign currencies. There's still, we've got 15 plus central banks, European banks helping to support the dollar, which has at this point lost 96.6% of its purchasing power against, as compared to 1940. Just in the last year, it's lost 6% against the Deutschmark and 9% against the yen. And so your dollar, folks, is extremely weak, and I think it's headed for even weaker times. So if you like something that isn't going to protect you, keep it in cash. But if you want something that's going to protect you, get some gold, get some silver, and give us a call at 1-800-289-2646, 1-800-BUY-COIN.
You keep saying the dollar is weak. What you really mean is the Federal Reserve note is weak. The dollar is defined by law as 1/20th of an ounce of gold.
That's true. You're absolutely right. The Federal Reserve note, which is not a dollar, it's just a worthless piece of paper that says IOU on it.
The dollar's strong. We're just not allowed to use it.
Yeah, it's no longer there.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
Thank you, Gene.
All right, Bill.
Call 1-800-289-2646, folks. 1-800-289-2646. You'll be glad that you did. Yes, the hour, the time is coming to you from just a little south of the old Route 66, and Ferris is finishing up the little minor touches to my 1958 Chevy Time-Mobile, and pretty soon I'm going to be cruising over to the Sonic Drive-In for a burglar and a root beer. Yes, sir. A right protected by the Constitution can never be curtailed by an act of Congress or by the state legislature. So what's happening all over this country? Why are we losing all our rights? Why are all these strange things happening? Remember, I told you last night that another one of my predictions was coming true. When on Entertainment Tonight, they announced that they were going to have the first televised execution of a murderer. I said June 17th. It's really June 15th. But just this morning, the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled that they can't do it. We found out some other information, ladies and gentlemen. They still plan on doing this in the New World Order. Public executions will be public and they will be televised. This is just the first attempt. And guess who was trying to bring this into fruition? Guess who was the person who was trying to make this a reality? Why, it's Rush Limbaugh's business partner, old communist, Marxist, Red Phil Donahue. Yep, Phil Donahue was behind the whole thing, folks. He was working with convicted murderer, sitting on death row, David Lawson, to get his execution televised on June the 15th. If it had not been for the North Carolina Supreme Court that rejected this proposal, it would have become a reality. They will try it again, I guarantee you, in another state until they get it done, folks. Now, what else is going on? Let me give you a few little tidbits to ponder here. July the 16th, 1782, the Congress of Wilhelmsbad was held, where the Illuminati combined with the higher levels of Freemasonry and the other secret societies to form one organization at the highest degrees to bring into reality their goal of a one-world government. That was July the 16th, 1782, folks, Congress of Wilhelmsbad. Now, it's very strange. When you add up those numbers, 716 and 1782, you come out with 32. 32 degrees is the highest degree in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Add 3 and 2 together, that's 5. 5 conceals the hidden number of Osiris, or 14. 4 and 1 is 5. On July the 16th, 1945, on the 33rd parallel, the first atomic bomb was detonated in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Now remember, it was detonated on the 33rd parallel. If you add 7, 16, and 1945 together, you come up, and remember, whatever number you end up with, you add those numbers together, you come up with the number 33. 3 and 3 is 6, the number of man. All of these things have occult significance, tremendous occult significance. On July 16th, 1994, supposedly the remnants of a comet named Shoemaker-Levy will slam into Jupiter. July 16th, 1994. Add 7, 16, and 1994 together, you get 37. 3 and 7 is 1, the number of perfection. The number of perfection, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you add the 5 from the original 716, 1782, and 716, 1994, 5 and 1 again is 6, the number of man. Remember, they believe that man is God. Remember also that Nagasaki and Hiroshima lie also on the 33rd parallel, and Harry Truman, who made the decision where to drop the bombs, was a 33rd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of the Southern jurisdiction. And Nagasaki and Hiroshima were the two largest centers of Christians in the nation of Japan. Just thought you might like to ponder those things. Now, things to be looking for before July the 16th, 1994. Disappearance of prominent political figures. The disappearance of the leaders in the arts and sciences. Disappearance of high-ranking military officers. If you see these people beginning to disappear from the public view, you had better get your butts underground. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is they have 49.7 pounds of plutonium on the way to Jupiter aboard the spacecraft Galileo. If they've been lying to us all along and it gets there July 16th, 1994, instead of when they tell us it's going to get there, and if you see a strange light in the sky that begins to get bigger and bigger, you had better get your butts underground. Because the first thing you will see is the light, because the light travels faster than what's coming afterward. What will come afterward will be a bombardment of radiation from the largest hydrogen bomb explosion in the universe, or in this solar system, let me put it that way, since the sun, Sol, was lit off. And for approximately 3 days, according to the experts that I have talked to, if this occurs, if it occurs, I don't know if it's going to occur or not, but if it occurs, this bombardment of the earth by radiation will kill every living thing above ground. It will be the largest bombardment of neutrons on the earth in the history of the earth that we know of, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I don't know if this is going to happen. I'm just telling you what to look for. If you see these signs, if you see important people beginning to disappear, important people in the arts and sciences, important people in industry, important people in the government, high-ranking military officers, if you see them beginning to disappear from the public view, you had better get underground. If you see a strange light in the sky and people began to mumble jumbo about the fulfillment of prophecy and all this kind of stuff coming true, and the Catholic Church begins to make rumblings about coming back to the church, you better get underground. Forget about the church, folks. And you better stay there for about 5 days if these things come to pass. I don't know if they will or not. I do know this, though. They've been telling us for over a year about this remnants of this comet named Shoemaker-Levy that are going to slam into Jupiter. I've talked to prominent astronomers, and they tell me they don't know where they get these figures because we don't have anything that can see out that far to see chunks of a comet that small and be able to predict with that accuracy exactly where they're going to hit. So, you figure it out. I don't know what the answer is. I just know that in light of what's on the way to Jupiter and what it's capable of doing, we had better be careful. We better watch for the signs that I have given you, and if you see them, you had better get underground and stay there until it's all over, whatever is going to happen. And if nothing happens, you can come back up and say, well, I did the responsible thing. I took care of myself and my family just in case. Bouvier's law, oh, by the way, everybody tomorrow is going to be talking about how crazy I am because I've just given you that warning and made these statements, and it's okay because everybody has called me absolutely insane and crazy before. And I've only been wrong once. I hope I'm wrong about this. Probably will be. But my conscience tells me that I had to give you that warning and tell you what to look for and what possibly might be happening. Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1870, pages 622 through 625. Quote, "It may be said that the Constitution executes itself. This expression may be allowed, but with as much propriety. These may be said to be laws which the people have enacted themselves, and no laws of Congress can either take from, add to, or confirm them. They are rights privileges or immunities which are granted by the people and are beyond the power of Congress or state legislators. It may be laid down as a universal rule, admitting to no exception, that when the Constitution has established a disability or immunity, a privilege or a right, these are precisely as that instrument has fixed them, and can neither be augmented nor curtailed by any act or law, either of Congress or a state legislator. We are more particular in stating this because it has sometimes been forgotten both by legislators and theoretical expositors of the Constitution, unquote. Quote, the general rule is that an unconstitutional statute, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose, since its constitutionality dates from the time of its enactment. In legal contemplation, it is as inoperative as if it had never been passed. Since an unconstitutional law is void, the general principles follow that it imposes no duties, confers no rights, creates no office, bestows no power or authority on anyone, affords no protection, and justifies no acts performed under it. A void act cannot be legally consistent with a valid one. An unconstitutional law cannot operate to supersede any existing valid law. Indeed, insofar as a statute runs counter to the fundamental law of the land, it is superseded thereby. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no courts are bound to enforce it, unquote. 16 American Jurisprudence, 2nd Section 177. Let no more be said about confidence in men, but bind them down from mischief with the chains of the Constitution. And he knew what he was talking about. His name was Thomas Jefferson. Mayberry versus Madison, 5, United States Supreme Court decision, 137, 174, and 176. All laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. Now, I want to address all you blithering idiots out there who have taken the side of the executive branch of the federal government by claiming that treaties under Article 6 of the Constitution can supersede the Constitution or can bring into effect things which the Constitution prohibits. Now, if you've been listening last night, the night before that, and tonight, you should know by now that anything which contradicts the Constitution is automatically null and void. That includes treaties. It includes laws passed by Congress. It includes all of these things. Now, my good friend, A. Ralph Epperson, claims that Congress has the right to legislate in all cases whatsoever, and that is this clause that they're using to destroy our nation. And that is not so either. Congress does not have the right to legislate in all cases whatsoever, except within the confines of the Federal District of Columbia and those territories which belong to the federal government, or in that land which the states have ceded and deeded to the federal government. That's the only place, really, that the federal government has any power whatsoever, except when we are engaged in interstate commerce. Ladies and gentlemen, it is absolutely insane to believe that our forefathers would have put together this Constitution and included within it a clause enabling the new government to make a treaty with a foreign nation, making the whole thing null and void instantly. The Supreme Court has ruled all laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. That includes treaties. They have ruled that any legislation, any law, anything which goes against the supreme law of the land is null and void. And if used, is used under the color of law and does not have the full force of law or any force whatsoever. as a matter of fact, considering the fact that over and over and over again I have read you Supreme Court decisions declaring such laws and such legislation null and void from their inception. Barron's Legal Dictionary defines unconstitutional in this way. Now listen to this. Conflicting with some provision of the United States Constitution, a statute found to be unconstitutional is considered void, or as if it had never been, and consequently all rights, contracts, or duties that depend on it are void. Similarly, no one can be punished for having refused obedience to an unconstitutional law. If you've been listening to this program for the last 4 or 5 nights, you're really having your whole concept of reality rearranged. For you see, ladies and gentlemen, you haven't been dealing with reality at all. You've been living in fantasy land. You've been going from ride to ride with your e-ticket. What's an e-ticket? Well, when you went to Disneyland in Anaheim, California, you used to be able to pay $20, and this was some years ago. You can't get in there for $20 now, but you used to be able to pay $20, and you got an e-ticket. And with this e-ticket, you could ride every ride in the park as many times as you wanted to, as long as you wanted to, till the park closed. That's what you've all been doing, see? You paid your $20, you got your e-ticket, and you've just been going from ride to ride, living this big, wonderful fantasy, thinking that everything is fine, and I'm telling you right now, your e-ticket's expired, the park is closed, and you got about 10 seconds to get outside the gate. Or you're going to be locked out of all the rides, you're going to be freezing in the middle of the night, in the middle of a dead amusement park with no place to go. The problem is when you get outside the gate, all of a sudden you're going to be confronted with traffic and smog and prostitutes and crime and muggings and drive-by shootings, the real world. And you see, that's what I'm confronting you with now, the real world, the real law. I'm forcing you out of the park. I'm tearing up your e-ticket. I'm telling you to get off Mr. Toad's ride. And look yourself in the mirror. The only reason that there is no law for the citizens of the 50 states which poses a tax on compensation for labor earned in the 50 states is because our Constitution bound our Congress and prohibited them from creating such a law. It is important to understand, folks, that the Internal Revenue Code is not unconstitutional only because it does not impose such a tax. You see, none of you ever read it. None of you ever went and looked up the law to find out why you're paying taxes, or if you're required to pay taxes, or what specific law specifically and unequivocally required you to file a return and pay income taxes. Nope. You just went and did it because all the other fools were doing it, and you decided you wanted to be just like the other fools. See, this is the only country in the world where people go through childhood wanting to grow up to be a fool. For 80 years, Americans have been paying a tax unbacked by any law that was applicable to them. This is a tax that Americans merely assumed that they owed. A question commonly asked by Americans when they initially learn that there is no law within the Internal Revenue Code making them liable for the graduated income tax is, why didn't the government just write a law to force Americans to pay the tax? The answer is, folks, that they have tried, but our Supreme Court has always stopped them cold by binding them to the chains of the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution for the United States of America, Article 6, Clause 2 and 3, Supremacy Clause, states this. Listen very carefully. Quote, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. The senators and representatives and members of the state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers of the United States and the several states shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you just heard what I said, they are bound to the supreme law of the land. They cannot go out and even propose a treaty which would contradict the supreme law of the land under the law. Now, we know that they've done this, and they know that they've interpreted Article 6 of the Constitution as giving them the power to do this, and they claim that it gives them the power to enter into treaties which destroy the Constitution. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely ridiculous, ludicrous on its face. It is so stupid a concept that it doesn't even deserve serious thought. And since I told you this, ladies and gentlemen, all of you have written me letters quoting politicians and quoting this and quoting that and quoting the Federal Register. The Constitution is what makes the decision, not all of those things that you quote, and the Supreme Court. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest that you screw your heads back on straight and stop trucking with the enemy. You are supporting the side of those who would destroy this country. No one has the right to pass any laws or enter into any treaty or anything or perform any act which contradicts the supreme law of the land. I'm going to read this again for you, and I want you to understand it. The Constitution for the United States of America, Article 6, Clause 2 and 3, the Supremacy Clause, states this. Quote, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. The senators and representatives and members of the state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers of the United States and the several states shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rule making or legislation which would abrogate them. Miranda versus Arizona, 384, United States Supreme Court decision, 436, page 491. The claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. Miller versus the United States. Now, this is a statement found on the front cover of the Internal Revenue Service Audit Manual and the Handbook for Special Agents. And I quote, "Agents, the material contained in this manual is confidential in character. It must not, under any circumstances, be made available to people outside of the service," unquote. Now I ask you, why not? Well, we obtained a copy of these confidential manuals. What is it that the IRS is so afraid the American people will find out? Probably the following excerpts that come right out of their own manuals. But I'm going to let you stew for a little bit while we take a short break. Don't go away. What you're going to hear will knock you right out of your seats. Hold on to your seats. This is out of the handbook for special agents of the Internal Revenue Service, Constitutional Law, Section 341.2. 1. Constitutional protections are provided in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment as followed. A. 4th Amendment. The right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. B. 5th Amendment. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless by presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval force, or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall he be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Note, McCarthy versus Amstein ruled that, quote, the Fifth Amendment applies alike to criminal and civil proceedings, unquote. This is coming right out of the Handbook for Special Agents, ladies and gentlemen. C. Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. 2. The privilege against self-incrimination does not permit a taxpayer to refuse a summons issued under IRC Section 7602 or a court order directing his or her appearance. He or she is required to appear and cannot use the Fifth Amendment as an excuse for failure to do so, although he or she may exercise it in connection with specific questions. Landy versus the United States. He or she cannot refuse to bring his or her records, but may decline to submit them for inspection on constitutional grounds. In the Vadner case, the government moved to hold a taxpayer in contempt of court for refusal to obey a court order to produce his or her books and records. Vadner refused to submit them for inspection by the government, basing his refusal on the Fifth Amendment. The court denied the government's motion to hold Vadner in contempt, holding that disclosure of his assets would provide a starting point for an evasion case. Further, the IRS supplement published on January the 10th, 1979 in Section 6 states this, quote, "A summons of a taxpayer's books and records for return of information is not recommended," unquote. Regarding the Fourth Amendment, the Supreme Court has expanded its definition, ruling that, quote, "It does not require the actual entry upon premises and search for a seizure of papers to constitute an unreasonable search and seizure within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment. A compulsory production of a party's private books and records to be used against himself or his property in a criminal or penal proceeding or a forfeiture is within the spirit or meaning of the amendment," unquote. Boyd versus United States, 116 United States Supreme Court decision, 616. The courts, however, ladies and gentlemen, have found a minor Fifth Amendment loophole. If the citizen takes a blanket fifth, meaning that they say in advance that they want to plead the fifth to every question before it is asked, the judge can overrule the Fifth Amendment plea on the grounds that the defendant didn't know what the questions were going to be. Prosecutors have entrapped citizens in the past by asking them if they wanted to exercise a blanket fifth. An enlightened citizen answers by saying, "I can't. I don't know what your questions will be." Then this patriotic citizen just answers each question separately by stating his or her rights in the same manner he or she did with the agent. Further, Miranda versus the United States, 424, United States Supreme Court decision 648, states that, quote, "The Fifth Amendment provision that the individual cannot be compelled to be a witness against himself cannot be abridged," unquote. Quote, "The information revealed in the preparation and filing of an income tax return is, for Fifth Amendment analysis, the testimony of a witness, as that term is used herein," unquote, Garner versus the United States, 1976. Quote, "There can be no question that one who files a return under oath is a witness within the meaning of the amendment," unquote. Sullivan versus United States, 274, United States Supreme Court decision, 259. The United States versus Dickerson, 413 F. 2nd, 1111, 1969, quote, "Only the rare taxpayer would be likely to know that he could refuse to produce his records to IRS agents. Who would believe the ironic truth that the cooperative taxpayer fares much worse than the individual who relies upon his constitutional rights," unquote. Got egg on your face yet, folks? Feeling a little sheepish, are you? Quote, "Because of what appears to be a lawful command on the surface, many citizens, because of respect for the law, are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance," unquote. United States versus Minkner, 350, United States Supreme Court decision, 179 and 187. See, all the lawyers know these things. They don't tell you these things. All the judges know these things, but they won't tell you these things. Why? Most of them are scumbags who are interested only in their own agenda, their own wallets, their own future, and they could care less about you. And to be a judge, you pretty much have to be a member of one of the secret societies, usually Freemasonry, and you have to be in league with those who are bringing about the one world government, the New World Order, the totalitarian socialist state, where individual rights and protections for those rights are not desired, nor will they be allowed or even considered, and where people who claim those rights will be called mental cases. Now I'm going to give you another citizen's secret from the Handbook for Special Agents, Constitutional Law, Section 342.12, Books and Records of an Individual. 1. An individual taxpayer may refuse to exhibit his books and records for examination on the ground that compelling him to do so might violate his right against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment and constitute an illegal search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment, unquote. Boyd versus U.S., United States Supreme Court, U.S. versus Vadner. Following is an example, ladies and gentlemen, of how citizens have successfully exercised their rights as protected by the Constitution against the criminal Internal Revenue Service. When the IRS requests to look at a citizen's books and records, the enlightened citizen simply takes control of the situation by asking the following very simple questions. Number 1, do you have a properly executed search warrant? And ladies and gentlemen, they never, ever do. Number 2, can the information that you are requesting be used against me in a criminal proceeding? And the agent is required to answer yes, because yes is the only answer that he can give. And 3, am I required by law to give you this information? The agent must then answer no or produce the law. And he cannot, therefore he must answer no. At this point, a wise citizen states, quote, I wish to exert my Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my papers and effects against an unreasonable search and seizure. I also wish to exercise my Fifth Amendment right against compelling me to be a witness against myself, unquote. Then the wise citizen politely tells the agent, goodbye. Goodbye. Be confident and never, ever show fear. Ever. If you are afraid, you are a slave. Fear attracts IRS agents like dead bodies attract vultures. Remember vultures in eagle's clothing? The only recourse the agent then has is to summons the citizen to bring his or her documents to court, in hopes that the black robe of the judge will intimidate the citizen into voluntarily relinquishing their rights. The judge has no more right to look at the personal papers of the citizen than the IRS agent had. The citizen can just bring his papers to court in a box, fulfilling the law, that he or she will never have to open. When the citizen, the wise citizen, exercises his or her rights, the judge has no choice but to dismiss. Actually, it is highly unlikely that an American citizen would ever receive a summons, ladies and gentlemen. For this is a quotation from Section 363 of the IRS Handbook for Special Agents. Quote, when a taxpayer or a witness refuses to submit requested information, all surrounding circumstances should be fully considered before a summons is issued. The likely importance of the desired information should be carefully weighed against the time and expense of obtaining it, the probability of having to institute court action, and the adverse effect on voluntary compliance by others if the enforcement efforts are not successful, unquote. And that's why they don't come and drag me into court, folks. Because I will prove in that court before the world that they are liars, scumbags, criminals, operating under the color of law, they are unconstitutional, and I will kick their bloody ass. Simple as that. You can do it too, but you must know the law. You must understand the real law. You must understand your own Constitution, which most of you have never read in your life. It is the United States of America. It is America. It is freedom. It is the only document ever penned by the hand and mind of man in the history of the world that ever set anyone free. And you're all so willing to give it up, or to pass amendments to change it, or to call constitutional conventions to do this or that, or to accept a new world order without even knowing what in the hell it is. Stupid. That's what I call it. I don't know what you call it, but I call it stupid. Stark, raving mad, insane. All of you should be committed to a mental institution until you're well. And that, folks, is the truth. That is the truth. The IRS cannot afford to set a court precedent that would smarten up its unwitting fools. Because of what appears to be a lawful command on the surface, many citizens, because of respect for the law, are cunningly coerced into waiving their rights due to ignorance. U.S. versus Minkner, 350, United States Supreme Court Decision 179 and 187. You all think the Supreme Court is doing bad things for you? Well, sometimes they make a bad decision, but when it comes down to the Constitution, they have always held for the sovereignty of the citizen in every instance. According to the Supreme Court, waivers of constitutional rights not only must be voluntary, they must be knowingly intelligent acts done with sufficient awareness of the relevant circumstances and consequences. Brady versus the U.S., 397. U.S. Supreme Court Decision 742 at 748, 1970. You see, folks, your rights were not granted by the Constitution. They were given to you by the Creator. And those of you who are so eager to destroy God, you'd better double think that action. For without God, you have no rights. Your rights were granted by the Creator. And all you lily-livered little sloppy Marxists out there, I know you hate to hear that word. Creator, 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 God, God, God. I'm going to drive you crazy. God, God, Creator, Creator. Every socialist listening to this broadcast just peed in his pants, folks. Your rights are your inborn and absolute prerogative to be happy, free, and left alone, if that is your desire. The government may not impose a charge or a fee for the exercise of a right. You have a natural right to be your own boss and to control your own destiny without governmental restraint or interference. So many people in the state of California have reclaimed their sovereignty and put their crowns back on their heads. They don't get a driver's license. They don't register their cars. They don't put plates on their cars. And there are so many of them in Los Angeles that the police don't even bother to stop them anymore. You have a natural right to be your own boss and to control your own destiny without governmental restraint or interference. All forms of regulatory, monetary, or physical restraint are contrary to and a violation of your fundamental right to liberty. You also have an unalienable right to be happy as long as your personal happiness does not infringe upon the rights or the happiness of others. Any infringement upon your happiness is a violation of your most sacred, fundamental right. You see, our Creator, I just love it, did not send us in this world to be unhappy or subservient. The only purpose of government in America is to increase your happiness, to protect your freedom, to protect your property, and to protect your privacy. Your government is your servant and your protector, and when it becomes your oppressor, it has violated the highest law in the land, our Constitution. rights are acknowledged in the Declaration of Independence and protected by the Constitution. The purpose of the Constitution was not to grant our rights, but to prohibit the government from infringing upon them. Now, I know a lot of you out there that have PhDs, have been to school all your life. And right now, you're sitting in kindergarten because you don't know not one little iota of what you think you know. And you can have all the titles and degrees in this whole world. If you don't know what I'm teaching you on this broadcast of the hour of the time, and have been doing so for over 2 years now, you are not an American, you are not a sovereign, you are not wise, you are not smart, you are a sheeple. Sheeple always will be sheared and eventually led to the slaughter. And you had better learn that if you never learn anything else. Now I'm going to give you a summary of some of your rights. These are just some of your rights. These are enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, and they include 1, life, 2, liberty, 3, the pursuit of happiness. The Supreme Court has expanded these rights to include, but not be limited to, 4, the right to privacy, 5, the right to property, 6, the right to travel unrestricted throughout the states, 7, the right to labor in a lawful occupation, 8, the right to keep the fruits of your labor, and 9, the right to safety. The 9th Amendment of our Constitution states, and I quote, "The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people," unquote. This means, ladies and gentlemen, that your rights are not limited to only to those expressed in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, are expanded by the Supreme Court. Remember, a right, according to Webster's dictionary, is, and I quote, "an individual's absolute prerogative to correctness, justice, and to that which is honorable, what one fairly has coming," unquote. Now don't get too excited. A lot of you don't have anything fairly coming. A lot of you haven't earned anything. You're sloughing off. Under the common law, you have the right and freedom to do anything you please as long as you do not encroach upon the rights of others, and you keep all contracts entered into knowingly, voluntarily, and intentionally. Also, because we the people, are the absolute sovereigns in our government, the courts have stated that we each have all of the rights of the King of England, and that's an awful lot of rights. The First Amendment protects the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the freedom to peaceably assemble, the freedom to petition the government for the redress of grievances. And don't get all upset about this freedom of the press. It guarantees the freedom of the press. In other words, those operating the press can gather what stories they wish, edit them whichever way they wish, and print or not print whichever ones that they wish. In other words, the freedom is granted to the owner of the press and those reporters in the press. And it does not mean that the press is going to tell you the truth, or that they are going to print objective information, or even true information. I'm sick and tired of you parroting this freedom of the press all the time. It's bullshit. If you want freedom of the press, you must have your own press, and then you have freedom. I know a lot of you don't understand that, but it's true. Second Amendment, right to bear arms, guns, things that go bang, boom, and kill animals and people and trees or anything else that those bullets hit. We have the right to those arms. And this, again, is going to make socialists just go into snit fits and fall right off the couch and probably have a seizure. But that's okay. Thomas Jefferson once said, the strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against the tyranny of the government. And that is the real reason for the second article in the amendment, that all these other issues are moot, and all gun legislation is null and void because it conflicts with the Constitution. Third Amendment. Freedom from housing soldiers without citizens' consent. Fourth Amendment, right to be secure in your person, your house, and your personal effects. Right against unreasonable searches and seizures without a properly executed, witnessed search warrant signed under oath by a judge, and particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. Right not to be held to answer for a capital or infamous crime except by a presentment or indictment by a grand jury. Right not to be tried twice for the same crime. Right not to be a witness against yourself. Right not to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Right against property being taken from a citizen by the government without just compensation. And we will finish this portion tomorrow night. Good night, and God bless you all.